Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 gubernatorial elections for the last time. That means that this is my official prediction for the 2024 gubernatorial elections. Today is Saturday, November 2nd, and that means that this is the last time I'll be giving you all my thoughts on these 11 races. At the end of the video, I will, obviously on top of having completed the map, I will show you my predictions. I have calculated them down to the percentage point, and you are happy to pause, screenshot, and come back after election day. These are my final calls in these races. With that being said, let's get started. There's only going to be one state that's going to fall into the safe Democratic column. This is Delaware. It's an open seat, but it's a blue state. Republicans haven't really contested it. It's in the safe Democratic column. Democrats will hold on to this governorship. Let's now go to our safe Republican states. There's a couple more. North Dakota, Missouri, West Virginia, and Vermont are all easy. Keep in mind, for those of you who don't know, Vermont is normally a very blue state, but there's a very popular Republican incumbent governor who's quite moderate, Phil Scott. He won re-election by 40 points in 2022. You'll see in my final margin predictions that it's going to be similar this time. So there is one more state that I want to talk about, though, and it's Utah, where Spencer Cox, the incumbent Republican governor, is running for re-election, and he will win. But it's notable that on top of a Democratic opponent, Phil Lyman, who ran in the GOP primary and got 46% of the vote to Cox's 54%, is running a write-in campaign. I do not think that Utah is going to be competitive enough for Lyman to cost Cox the race or come close to doing so, but there will be a couple of Republicans, especially who are more right-wing, because Lyman is running to the right of Cox, who are going to vote for Lyman. This will reduce Cox's margin. Maybe it'll be a 15-point race at best for the Democrats, but keep in mind that Utah is a lot redder down ballot, so it won't matter anyways. Spencer Cox will be reelected here. Now, with that, let's get into our likely Republican states. The first one's going to be Montana. And in Montana, the polling data shows a consistent 20-point lead for Greg Gianforte, who is the incumbent governor who won in 2020 by 13 points. He's now running for re-election against really token opposition in Ryan Boose. Ryan Boose, I don't necessarily think he's a bad candidate, but he hasn't gotten the proper support from the National Democrats to be competitive in this state, and Montana is as red as ever, really, especially nowadays. So even though I'm putting this unlikely, I think it's definitely at the higher end of it, and the only reason I think it's going to dip below 15 is because there is a libertarian running in this race. It's not going to be close, and Greg Gianforte will, I think, win by a considerable amount, as I will show you at the end of the video. Let's go to Indiana, though. This is, I think, the most interesting of the, kind of more solid races. Now, Indiana, this is between Senator Mike Braun and Jennifer McCormick, who is running a pretty strong campaign. She is, I think, the former state superintendent of public education, so she's won statewide before, but as a Republican. Jennifer McCormick, again, is interesting because in the latest polling data, she is doing, okay. And the best nonpartisan poll we have is from Emerson in mid-September. It had it as an 11-point race with a lot of undecided voters. Mike Braun will likely win this race, and I think by a considerable amount. But Indiana, it's a bit bluer down ballot, and we have seen evidence that there are going to be a couple people who might vote for Trump but are going to vote for Democratic candidates for governor, especially because Mike Braun, I don't think, has run the best campaign. So I think we're going to see about a 5-point ticket split here with Indiana. It's still going to stay red by a good amount, but Democrats will overperform in the governor's race. Now, let's go over to our likely Democratic states. We're going to have two. The first is going to be Washington, where we have obviously that two-way race. What's interesting here about Washington is that obviously we had the primary, and Democrats did well here. They won this by 13 points. Bob Ferguson right now leads by 17 in the latest polling, but again, we've kind of gotten some mixed signals here. In the primary, Ferguson finished ahead of Bob Reichert, who's the Republican running, by around, I think, 13 or 14 points. And that was actually one of the weaker showings for Democrats here. So I do believe that Bob Reichert is going to be one of the best Republican candidates in Washington in terms of percentage of the vote gained. But he's still down in most polls. We saw Survey USA had him down by 16. LA Research had him down by 14. They had him down by 11. Signal, which is a GOP poll, had it as a 4-point race back in August, which is interesting. And this Democratic internal from PPP isn't great for Ferguson either. But no polls have showed this, aside from that one Signal poll. No polls have showed this race close. Washington's a left-trending state, and the presidential polling there looks good for Kamala Harris. I think it's going to be I'd be impressed if Republicans come within 10 here. Bob Ferguson, obviously, who is currently the Secretary of State of Washington, is likely going to win this race by a considerable amount, even though he will do a few points worse than Kamala Harris. Let's now go to North Carolina. This race was originally thought to be very competitive, but Republicans have just had a really bad time here. I mean, Mark Robinson, as I'm sure you all know, has run a very poor, run a very bad campaign. He's had a litany of scandals, right? He said a lot of controversial things. For content purposes, I'm not going to get into too many of them, but he spread conspiracy theories about Jewish people. He's made many controversial comments like this "some folks need killing" comment, right? He's also, Democratic opposition research has absolutely, I think, killed Robinson's campaign with them having uncovered things he said online on forums in the past. You're free to look it up. I will not be getting into it again for content purposes. But the fact of the matter is, Mark Robinson has run a very poor campaign. Democrats have hammered him for his scandals in the past, while their candidate, Josh Stein, has been pretty solid. Stein is the current Secretary of State, he's the current Attorney General of North Carolina. So he has won statewide twice before. He won narrowly in 2020 on the same ballot as Donald Trump. So we have seen Josh Stein's been able to win in North Carolina, even though Republicans will carry the top of the ticket with Trump. And in the polls, it's not close. If we take a look at the latest high-quality, we have a lot of North Carolina polls. I'm just going to focus on the high-quality ones. Fox had Robinson down by 16. He was down by 16 in CNN. He was down by 15 in the Survey USA poll. He was down by 12 in the UMass poll, down by 13 in Emerson, down by 14 in Marist, down by 15 in this SoCal Strategies poll, 16 in Survey USA, 8 in Redfield and Wilton, and a 21 in a local poll from Elon University. You'd have to go back to, I think, before the spring to find a poll that has Mark Robinson ahead here. He's run a very bad campaign. Republicans, I think, have all but given up on it. I feel comfortable putting in this in the likely column. There has been a lot of talk about whether or not Stein is going to win by 12 or 13 points, and people have actually begun to compare Mark Robinson to Doug Mastriano, who lost by 15 to Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania in 2022. The polling data obviously has suggested a pretty big Democratic victory. I do err on the side of caution here. I think that Republican voters are going to come home for Mark Robinson. It's not going to be enough to save, but I think it's going to be a closer race than people think. So that leaves us with New Hampshire, which I think is going to be the true toss-up of the night. This state, even though it's going to be a bit blue-leaning presidentially, I'd be shocked if Harris lost it. This governor's race is coming down to the wire. So let's talk about it. Right now, it's Kelly Ayotte versus Joyce Craig, who's the mayor of Manchester. Kelly Ayotte is a former senator. And in the polls, Ayotte has, started to edge ahead here. What we've seen is that in the latest, I think, high-quality polls, I'm a big fan of New Hampshire local polls. She has an advantage. St. Anselm has her up by 3. UMass Lowell had her up by 2, and then Emerson, which is a national pollster, obviously had her up by 4. Dartmouth, the Dartmouth poll did have Ayotte up, or Craig up by under 6%, which obviously is a good result for her. But the majority of polling does show an advantage for Ayotte. And again, the interesting thing here is that we've kind of gotten a wide range of results. We've seen a big win for Craig. We've also seen more recently some pretty decent wins for Ayotte. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle, but I do advantage Ayotte for a couple reasons. The first is that she's been able to tie herself to Chris Sununu, who is the popular Republican incumbent governor here. Sununu won by almost 20 points in 2022 as a Republican, obviously in a Democratic-leaning state. And his administration's popular. He's among the most popular governors in the United States. What this means is that Ayotte, it's advantageous for her if voters on election day perceive her as being a continuation of Sununu. Again, Ayotte's also won statewide before. In 2010, she won a Senate race by 20 points. Obviously, that was 14 years ago, and a lot has changed since then, and she did lose re-election narrowly in 2016. But she's an experienced politician, and again, Democrats, I think, in this governor's race kind of recognize that there are more consequential races. They've actually spent more energy trying to beat Mark Robinson in North Carolina than they have trying to beat Ayotte in New Hampshire. Joyce Craig is a good candidate, and she's, I think, held up well in this race, but genuinely, New Hampshire is a bit redder down ballot. They like to split their ticket. I do expect Harris to carry the state by a good amount. I'll talk more about that in my final presidential election prediction, so please do, again, go subscribe and make sure you don't miss that. But again, ticket splitting is going to be real here. I think we're going to see a good amount of Harris Ayotte voters, and at the end of the day, that'll be enough to put Ayotte over the line by the slimmest of margins. I mean, I think it's going to be, as I'm about to show you, it's going to be a very close race here. So what does that mean? We're going to see no flips, unfortunately, I guess it's a bit less fun. North Carolina is going to stay blue. I think Republicans have really blundered this race. New Hampshire is going to stay red, though. Democrats I think this is a bit of a missed opportunity for them. They had a chance to pick up this seat with Chris Noonan, the longtime popular incumbent governor here, retiring. It's now going to be, I'm predicting, narrow Republican hold, but obviously this race is going to be close, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if Joyce Craig does pull it off in the end. So with that, it is time for the final predictions I will show you right now. So I've, again, put together my percentages. Obviously I calculated these. I took into account third parties in some states. You'll notice that Utah, notably, these percentages don't come close to adding up to 100 because I'm counting on some write-in votes for Phil Lyman. But I've got my race ratings. As you can see, New Hampshire is going to be the closest with just under a 2% margin of victory for the Republicans. There are a couple third parties running here, but I do think that people here are going to recognize the competitiveness of this race and choose to vote, come home for either the Democrats or the Republicans. North Carolina, as I said, the polls have it like a double-digit Stein victory. I think it's going to be closer to 6 or 7 right now. He's up by a little over 7% in this final prediction. So that's what I've got for you today. Again, stay tuned. I'm going to release my final House prediction on Sunday. So that's going to be very consequential. That chamber is a pure toss-up, and I'm not lying when I say that right now I'm still figuring out who I'm going to pick in the last few truly competitive seats. So stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Give the video a like. Tell me who you think is going to win. I'm especially curious to hear your guys' thoughts on New Hampshire because it's going to be so close. But as always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.